Don't panic! Don't panic! Right, don't panic, you're all right.
Today, it is in every single province in China. They also claimed for almost 2 months, until earlier this week, that it had originated in a seafood market in Wuhan. That locals had contracted it from animals in, say, bat soup or snake tartare. That is not the case. The Lancet published a study last weekend demonstrating that of the original 40 cases, 14 of them had no contact with the seafood market, including patient 0. As one epidemiologist said, that virus went into the seafood market before it came out of the seafood market. We still don't know where it originated. Could have been another seafood market. Could have been a farm. Could have been a food processing company. I would note that Wuhan also has China's only biosafety level 4 super laboratory that works with the world's most deadly pathogens, to include, yes, coronavirus.
Coronavirus that we're dealing with here is an offensive biological warfare weapon that leaked out of that Wuhan BSL-4. I'm not saying it was done deliberately, but there have been previous reports of problems with that lab and things leaking out of it.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs, and no doubt you know all about this coronavirus. However, one thing I've noticed on all of these videos is when people actually fall over, they never seem to put their hands out to stop them, which is like a natural reflex action to stop yourself from getting hurt. You normally put your arms out in front of you as you fall over. Now, what we're going to see, is a doctor who's unfortunately died. He was the doctor who first alerted everybody to the coronavirus, and he caught it. We've got some of his reaction to the affliction on video, and I want to show you the sort of reaction that people who are suffering from this coronavirus seem to have. And here we are. It shows you that he's exhausted from overwork. These doctors are just working ridiculous hours, and they just go from being, reasonably robust to collapsing out of nowhere. So here's this unfortunate chap. He's trying to pull himself together, and look what happens. He's trying to get. This is not something I've ever seen of anybody who has the flu. Look how he's holding his left arm down over, and watch as he falls over. The attempt, there seems to be hardly any attempt to put the arms out. And I'm seeing this again and again and again. But let's have a look now at the Johns Hopkins University webpage that has a live update on the coronavirus. And I want you to look at the top right hand corner. 565 deaths versus 1,382 people have survived. These are people who've gone through it. That's a 1 in 3 chance of death. Just off those figures. You can't take anything from the left hand side. Look at the people who've gone through it and who have survived and who haven't. Now, this is the World Health Organization page, and they're asking, where did it come from? The answer is the virus origin has not yet been established. So it was originally thought that it was from bats. Now we had people who were guessing it was from snakes. And listen to this lady who.
All right. So since this whole virus thing started, we've been told that it was started by food that was consumed to humans from, animals. We've heard everything from wolf pups to bats, and now a study is saying that they've tracked it down to a snake, or snakes rather, that have been sold at the market there in Wuhan as food. It's a food source. So while the beginning of this new virus appeared to be linked to bats, genetically, researchers found evidence that the virus at some point made its way into snakes before ultimately reaching human patient 0. That's like some Resident Evil stuff, dude. It was the ability to recombine within the viral receptor binding protein that likely facilitated the virus's cross-species transmission from snakes to humans.
Fire is joined by Dr. Francis Boyle, who is international law professor at the University of Illinois. We'll be discussing the Wuhan coronavirus and biological warfare. He's served as counsel to numerous governments such as Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Palestinian Authority. He's represented numerous national and international bodies in the areas of human rights, War Crimes and Genocide, Nuclear Policy, and Biowarfare. He's written numerous books, one of my favorites being Destroying Libya and World Order, which I assigned as mandatory reading material for my own students when I taught at the Monterey Institute of Technology. But most important for this interview, he's written a book called Biowarfare and Terrorism and drafted the U.S. domestic implementing legislation for the Biological Weapons Convention, known as the Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act of 1989, that was approved unanimously by both houses of the U.S. Congress and signed into law by President Bush. And thanks for joining us, Dr. Boyle.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and thanks for that kind introduction.
Now, let's get to what's been on the news recently, this coronavirus in Wuhan. There have been some reports recently. There's a really interesting website called Great Game India that has been reporting on this. And they've been talking about China, which they say has been complying with Biological Weapons Convention in recent years. But then there are some people in the U.S. and experts that have been saying that in reality, China isn't complying with the Weapons Convention. And I think neither perhaps the U.S. As well. And, you know, I'm wondering if China is developing its own biosafety level 4 lab in Wuhan and elsewhere as, you know, as a type of deterrence. Is it a type of biological arms race that we have going on? You told me in an email that you suspect China was developing the coronavirus as a dual-use biowarfare weapons agent. And also, what do you make of reports that Chinese scientists have been stealing research and viruses, including the coronavirus, from a Canadian biolab this past December? And as well, Chinese nationals have been charged with smuggling vials of biological research to China from the U.S. With the aid of Charles Leiber, who was the chair of Harvard's chemistry department, and who also happened to be in 2011 a strategic scientist at Wuhan University. So can you tell us what's going on with this recent outbreak in Wuhan?
Right. Well, that's a lot of questions. I guess we can take them one at a time. But if you just do a very simple Google search on does China have a BSL-4 laboratory, Wuhan comes up right away. It's at the top of the list. That's all. The moment this type of thing happened, I began to do that. And so a BSL-4 is the most serious type. And basically, BSL-4 labs, we have many of them here in the United States, are used to develop offensive biological warfare weapons with DNA genetic engineering. So it does seem to me that the Wuhan BSL-4 is the source of the coronavirus, yes. And my guess is that they were researching SARS and they weaponized it further by giving it gain of function properties, which means it could be more lethal. And indeed, the latest report now is its 15% fatality rate, which is more than SARS, and 83% infection rate. So typical gain of function, it travels in the air. So it could reach out maybe 6 feet or more from someone emitting a sneeze or a cough. Likewise, this is a specially designated WHO research lab. So the WHO is in on it, and they knew full well what was going on there. Yes, it's also been reported that Chinese scientists stole coronavirus materials from the Canadian lab at Winnipeg. Winnipeg is Canada's foremost center for research, developing, testing biological warfare weapons. It's along the lines of Fort Detrick here in the United States of America. And yeah, I have 3 degrees from Harvard. Would not surprise me if something was being stolen out of Harvard to turn over to China. I read that report. I don't know what was in those vials one way or the other. But the bottom line is, my opinion is, and I drafted the U.S. domestic implementing legislation for the Biological Weapons Convention. that was approved unanimously by both houses of the United States Congress, signed into law by President Bush Sr., that it appears the coronavirus that we're dealing with here is an offensive biological warfare weapon that leaked out of that Wuhan BSL-4. I'm not saying it was done deliberately, but there have been previous reports of problems with that lab and things leaking out of it. And I'm afraid that is what we are dealing with today.
And so, can you give us, I mean, we'll be talking about the Wuhan and the coronavirus in China, but can you give us kind of like a bigger context? I know you've previously in interviews said that since 9/11, you think that the U.S. has spent $100 billion on biological warfare research. We know the Soviet Union, if I'm not mistaken, developed anthrax as a bioweapon. And you've also mentioned that UK, France, Israel, and China are all involved in biological warfare weapons research. So, and something interesting, I believe 1 or 2 years ago, a Bulgarian journalist and the Russian government shared their concern of the discovery of a U.S. bioweapons lab in Georgia, in the country of Georgia. You've commented how in Africa, U.S. has set up bioweapons labs to work on Ebola, which I think is illegal under international law, but they were allowed somehow to put those in Africa. So can you give us like a bigger picture, what's going on with these different countries and what's the purpose of this research?
All these BSL-4 labs are by, United States, Europe, Russia, China, Israel, are all there to research, develop, test biological warfare agents. There's really no legitimate scientific reason to have BSL-4 labs. And that figure I gave, 100 billion, that was about 2015, I believe. I had crunched the numbers and came up with that figure, the United States since 9/11. That, to give you an idea, that's as much in constant dollars as the U.S. spent to develop the Manhattan Project and the atom bomb.
We know that this virus causes severe disease and that it can kill. Although for most people, it causes milder symptoms. We know that among those infected, 1/4 of patients have experienced severe disease. We know that most of those who have died had underlying health conditions such as hypertension, diabetes, or cardiovascular disease that weakened their immune systems. We know that there is human-to-human transmission in China, but for now, it appears limited to family groups and health workers caring for infected patients. At this time, there is no evidence of human-to-human transmission outside China. But that doesn't mean it won't happen. There is still a lot we don't know. We don't know the source of this virus. We don't understand how easily it spreads. And we don't fully understand its clinical features or severity. WHO is working with our partners night and day in China and the other affected countries at the regional level and here at the headquarters to fill the gaps in our knowledge as quickly as possible.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Out of the mouth of the World Health Organization. They do not know the origin of this virus, but you try and tell anybody it could possibly be from this level 4 biolab, and they'll tell you it's not. Ask yourself the question, if they don't know where it comes from, how do they know? And why are they telling you it's not that super level 4 biolab? I'm not saying it is, but what I do know is I don't believe the WHO. Take care of yourselves. You've been marvellous. I've been Graham French. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one. See you later.